From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here on a Thursday. Good show on tap for you. An awful lot happening right now with regard to, say, our lawmakers. And obviously a big day yesterday with the presidential inauguration. But you know, the state legislature here in Tennessee in session, getting going. We also have a new president, all right, and a new administration. We have changes in the House and the Senate at the federal level, as we do here at the state level. And they'll be addressing all kinds of issues. And one issue, of course, that's very important, especially to those of us here in the state of Tennessee, is gun rights and the Second Amendment and where we stand on that. And a lot of questions about, okay, well, are there going to be some changes here or there with regard to what's happening in Washington, D.C. or here in the state of Tennessee? So we thought we'd review a few of those and give you a chance to join in the conversation if you'd like. We're going to be streaming on Facebook at newschannel5.com if you want to send any comments or questions there. And we're also, of course, right here on the Plus. Also this morning, we're going to discuss the NRA, the National Rifle Association. Many of you, I'm sure, members, and the changes that are in the works for the NRA. First of which, as you may have heard, declared bankruptcy. Second, in the process of moving from New York State to Texas. And a class action lawsuit actually filed against the NRA by an individual here in the state of Tennessee. What that is all about and the future of that organization. To talk about this and so much more is a man who knows all these issues, and that would be John Harris with the Tennessee Firearms Association joining us. Good morning, John, and looking good there. Did I hear that you were starting a podcast now?
We have. TFA, as of January, has started a podcast. The first two sessions are already online, the most significant of which is a legislative forecast, what we expect to see filed in Tennessee this year. Two more editions are in production right now. One of those is a review of the Tennessee and U.S. constitutions and how it impacts gun rights in Tennessee.
Well, that's fantastic. I'll have to check it out. Congratulations on that. And I can tell your hookup and attachment with us is so clear as a bell. This is really good for doing this morning line on Zoom. Well, let's start with that, if you would, if you don't mind, kind of recapping a bit of what's on your podcast. And we'll start local. But, you know, we've got the legislature in session. I know that's a busy time for you. And, yeah, what are you predicting right now with regard to gun rights in the state of Tennessee? What do you think is going to be brought up this next session, and what has a chance of passing, and what are you supporting?
Well, you know, the forecast was pretty easy when we did it this year because we had bills pending in 2020, several of which were moving forward, and one of them was already passed by the House in its session before COVID hit. So we fully expect to see the bills that were already drafted, negotiated, and moving forward in the legislature last year to move quickly back to the floor this year. What we're going to see, we're pretty certain, is Governor Lee is going to reintroduce his legislation. He called it constitutional carry, but constitutional carry is not the right descriptor for what he filed. He filed a bill that would have created a unique defense to a criminal charge for certain classes of people that can own a gun, but not for all classes of people. And that is not constitutional carry. It's just a criminal defense, a new one that he's proposed, and he's mislabeled it. We expect to see that put back up, and it'll be coupled, we expect, like it was last year, with what the primary mission of the bill is, and that is a massive crime expansion. A lot of money spent on new crimes or enhancements of penalties. We do expect to see some other bills, like Representative Griffey has already filed, that is in fact constitutional carry. We expect to see Representative Chris Todd's bill on civil immunity. Tennessee already has a civil immunity law. It's very weak. This would substantially strengthen it.
Explain what that means.
It already passed last year.
Okay, and a lot of these, I think many of our viewers probably are familiar with it. For instance, for me, and maybe a few that don't, explain again, if you would, civil immunity and what that means.
Yeah, civil immunity in Tennessee, the concept of self-defense is really just that. It's a defense to a criminal charge that you committed a homicide or used deadly force against someone else.
Right.
So by definition, shooting someone or threatening them with a gun is an assault or a homicide. Self-defense is a justification. And anytime that happens, and we see this, like, for example, with police excessive force cases, anytime there's that criminal charge arising in a self-defense scenario, there's also a possibility that the person who got shot or their family might sue and say, you used excessive force, you shouldn't have shot, our friend or son or family member. Sort of like what happened in the O.J. Simpson. You had the criminal case and the civil case.
Yeah.
What this civil immunity bill says is you can't even bring the civil case in Tennessee, if this passes, until after the criminal case is concluded. And there's constitutional reasons that we want to do that, to protect the right against self-incrimination or the right to give testimony or refuse to give testimony. And also the civil case just sort of messes up a lot of the procedures in the criminal case. And so we want to strengthen that civil immunity standard.
Okay, but just common sense seems to dictate that you would go with the criminal case, and if it goes to trial and it's found that the individual did act in self-defense, then that, I would think, makes that civil lawsuit moot. If it's found that that individual did not act in self-defense and killed someone, then that civil lawsuit would have some merit, right? I mean, kind of seems to follow that way.
Well, not necessarily, because you've got different judges in the two cases, different juries, and the standard of guilt in a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. And just like in the O.J. Simpson matter, the standard of liability or fault in the civil case is a preponderance of the evidence, which is essentially more likely than not. So there are different legal standards that apply in the two cases.
Now, that's a good point. Okay, so you could have one result there and a different one in the civil court. All right, so that's interesting. They'll address that. Before we get to some phone calls and move on to some other issues, I'm just curious, anything else that really stands out for you, or are these going to be a lot of them that, are just picking up where they left off last session? Anything new?
Oh, no, we've got some real issues coming up that I think have a lot of popular support that are not necessarily legislative issues that have reached a lot of attention in the past. 2020 brought to a lot of people's attention in Tennessee the issue of, can I use my firearm, or what level of force can I use to protect my home, my business inventory from looters, from rioters, from arsonists. And so this was highlighted to a lot of gun owners by this McCluskey matter out of Missouri, where their, news reports ran for days and weeks about this couple standing in their front yard against a mob with an AR-15 and a handgun. And in Tennessee, if you did that same thing here in Tennessee right now under current law, the homeowner could be charged with a higher grade of felony than a looter or rioter or mob person, even if they actively trespassed or did damage to the property. And so there's a bill that's been filed by Representative Jay Reedy, actually two of them, and there may be a third coming, that addresses that issue of when can a property owner, when can a homeowner, a business owner, someone in that continuum, use force to stop a trespass, stop a looter, stop a mob from damaging their property. And that's a huge issue, because a lot of insurance policies will not cover damage arising out of a riot or a mob, where they might cover damage from just a thief.
Okay, and I know you and I actually did a story along these lines a few months ago where we talked about it, and I hear what you're saying there, and the idea of that couple standing out there, who I understand did face some charges. That would be a deterrent, standing out there, hey, stay off my property, and the mob going around them. The other aspect of this, you made reference when we talked a while back about how, we had the looting on 2nd Avenue earlier last year when they had the riot downtown, set fire to the courthouse and all of that. And the thinking of, at what point can one of those business owners use force to stop the looting? And under some of what's being discussed on the law, and this is what was more controversial, you're saying, well, okay, if you're the owner in one of these boot stores and some guy comes in and grabs the boots and then turns around and starts running out the store, that maybe under some of these laws you would be within your rights, if they pass, to shoot him as he runs away to recover the merchandise. And I think a lot of people wonder if that's the case, then that may be a bit far. You're kind of acting in the role of judge, jury, and executioner there.
Well, in Tennessee, that looting example with downtown Broadway, for example, the property owner could not brandish the weapon, they couldn't point it, they couldn't display it, much less discharge it in an effort to try to stop someone just committing a property theft or damaging their property, trying to, break in the windows or whatnot. There would actually have to be, and the property owner would have to show that there was imminent fear of death or serious bodily harm. If the property owner couldn't make that play, couldn't carry that evidence forward, then the property owner, just say they pulled the gun out and said, hey, stop, drop the boots, or you're under citizen's arrest. If the property owner even just did that, they could be charged with the felony of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon in Tennessee.
But don't we know, but there have been cases certainly where a property owner or a homeowner comes across a burglar or a robber, coming into the home, and they pull the gun and they hold them for police at gunpoint. And the police sometimes then come and arrest them, take them away, and good for them. They're defending themselves. I mean, I haven't heard of someone being prosecuted in that manner. I mean, that to me sounds absurd that someone would be charged with, holding someone at gunpoint. Now, you're saying, though, that if that individual looks at him, smiles, laughs, and says whatever and runs off, then they can't do anything more beyond that, even though I don't know how many burglars are going to do that if they've got a gun in their face.
Well, it's worse than that, Nick, because you're right. It does sound ludicrous, but the current wording of the Tennessee statutes would make it a high-grade felony for that property owner to pull the gun and hold it on him and say, stop, I've called the police, you're under arrest. That would be a crime for the property owner in Tennessee. Now, you're right. A police officer may decide, I'm not going to prosecute that. The DA may decide, I'm not going to prosecute that. But believe me, I've had plenty of conversations with former district attorneys in Tennessee and assistant district attorneys in particular who said that's in the discretion of the DA. And whether or not you get charged like downtown Nashville with one of those property owners with the criminal charges as the property owner with our current district attorney is a lot different than whether or not you might get charged, say, in one of the more rural counties.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. Sounds like something that'll be addressed by lawmakers. We'll take a break. When we come back, we've got some comments on Facebook, which we're streaming live if you want to join us there, and also some phone calls. If you're on hold, Joe, Caleb, and others, we'll get to you. More of our conversation with John Harris, Tennessee Firearms Association, where we're going with some of the laws, changes, things along those lines with guns right after this. Stay with us.